This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe. I'm Matteo Rizzi. Today I'm at the airport, so it's an unexpected trip, so forgive if there is some background noise. But on the contrary, to compensate that noise, I'm bringing you a stellar array of speakers, starting by my co-host, nothing else than Brett. Hey, Brett, welcome.
Hey, good to be back on the EU cast, man. And you'd think it wouldn't be a problem these days from the airport because no one's visiting airports, right? So it should be like a ghost town, right?
Well, it is, but Lisbon is one of the few airports with a few people still, going to the beach. So, Brett, I think it's about time to introduce our guest.
Let's get started.
Why don't you do it? So I put myself on mute and I'll kick off the discussion.
All right, so let's do it in alphabetical order. We'll start with David. You want to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yes, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm really honored. I'm here. I'm calling from Dubai. I'm part of management of local bank, the National Bank of Fujairah, taking care about the digital transformation strategy and implementation. Before of that, I've launched a payment platform for one of the biggest players, e-commerce, Noon.com. Now is competing with Amazon. And before of that, I was in Italy, taking care about payments and so e-money and so forth.
So an Italian living in Dubai. Very cool. Yeah. And Mike, what about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I've been a banker my entire career, built 3.5 banks to date. I say 0.5 because having built 3 big banks for big banks, I thought I could do my own one in the Middle East and went off to build my own digital bank. And unfortunately, couldn't, given regulatory reasons and lots of other different things that kind of came along. But there's still a couple more banks in me. I'm currently working out in Saudi Arabia for Banque Saudi Fransi, where I'm the Chief Strategy and Digital Officer. And watch this space, exciting things coming out of Saudi for sure.
Yeah, well, I can, share with, obviously I've been working with STC Pay on
I know, you're trying to spoil my party, Brett.
Yeah, well, we can compare notes, but you should be celebrating the fact that a new bank is emerging to create some competition there, right?
I know, I am. I'm welcome to it, absolutely.
Very good. And last but not least, Osama Al Rahma. You spend a lot of time in Europe every year. You've worked extensively in Switzerland and elsewhere, but tell us a bit more about yourself, Osama.
Yeah, my name is Osama Al Rahma. I'm based in Dubai. Currently, I'm the CEO of the Fardan Exchange. I've been in the remittance and the payment industry. I've been witnessing the evolution of the remittances and mainly the financial inclusion stuff of it. And it's been interesting to see how the technology been disrupting the business models. And been also escalating in the way of our reach. But I'm really happy to have all of you today to listen and to learn from all of you.
Fantastic. So, Matteo, jump in.
Yeah, so I wanted to start exactly by Osama because, Osama and I and you, Brett, as well, go back, almost a decade ago, back into, we were at Swift, InnoTribe kicked in. We were trying to bring innovation everywhere in the world. And, Dubai has always been sort of the best kept secret, right? So enormous capital available, a lot of sort of catalyst for startups to get programs to get started into the region. How is this evolved in the past decade? Osama, before we kick into the Europeans and with their lenses, what's your view of what happened in fintech in the past 10 years in the region?
Well, as I have mentioned at the beginning, a lot of evolution taking place. The facilitation of this kind of innovative ideas came through what we call it the offshore regulatory framework, which is within the Fintech Hive and within the IFC or within the ADGM, which has been very aggressive recently in acquiring the fintechs and the startups and facilitating such environment and the sandboxes and the regulatory framework around that one, going beyond what's happening with the incumbents like the normal regulatory bodies like the central banks. But even eventually, there is now a tie-up between the central bank and the ADGM to encourage the fintechs and to provide a better landscape for them. Yes, we have seen a lot of things. We've been part of that one, as you know very well. We broke the financial inclusion by introducing for example, the prepaid card for the unbanked people down here. And it was kind of a totally new product to engage them and to include them to be part of the virtual, experiences later on. We are seeing a lot of things. The government is taking also a lot of initiatives in building the infrastructure for the full digital transformation. And that is came under the Smart Dubai. And we know about the adoption to the blockchain for the whole government, for example. And today, the digital identity through the UAE Pass. And I believe a lot of things. I've been attending also a private workshop with the government body yesterday for more than 2 hours, trying to build the whole strategy of a cashless society within the coming 3 years' time. So I believe those items are there. Dubai as a city wants always to position itself as a smart city, and that the payment side comes always on top priority of such initiatives.
So, Osama, based on the fact that obviously, you spend a lot of time offshore, you're working with international players like SWIFT and, others, how much of that process that you have in government committee, as an advisor to the central bank and so forth, is sort of injecting those ideas from Europe and the US and elsewhere into Dubai to sort of get that best of breed, because it seems like Dubai's always hungry for that, absorbing those different ideas.
Yeah, I mean, once they started a few years ago with the Smart Dubai, they took a tour on all the winning cities as smart cities around the world. So they wanted to have the best of the best from practices point of view. And I believe the same approach is taking place now when it comes to the payment. So we are working also closely. I've been part of the proof of concept for the eKYC with the ADGM a couple of years ago, a study which we made it with one of the top 4. And then we presented the outcomes to the central bank. That is kind of an evolving things between the traditional and minds thinking and how you advocate toward breaking those walls. I believe you need always people who drive such initiatives and keep sometimes, clarifying the fear about stepping into these new technologies or new regulatory sometimes laws that allow such practices to take place. Ultimately, we are reaching toward that one because the objectives today is being very clear to go toward digital. And we got a new chairman for example, the central bank, His Highness Sheikh Mansour, and his first speech to the management that he wants to see the digital transformation on the top of priority. That gives you a lot of confidence and also allow the incumbents to to invest into the technology.
Yeah. No, I get it. Hey, Mike, obviously you've come from, the European markets and, regulated in a very different way. But working in the kingdom, if you just go back a few years before MBS's sort of recent push for innovation, the common retort when you come into Saudi would be, things are different here. Right. But there's obviously the last sort of 2-3 years have seen a rapid change in posture in respect to that position. So, what's it been like being in that market where it's gone from, you got the Saudi market's different, the rules are different here, now suddenly them trying to catch up and be a lot more like what's happening in other markets around the world?
Yeah, it's amazing, right? That, to be on that ride. There's no doubt that, His Highness MBS and the Vision 2030, and then all of the programs that support that, and the one that's, particular to bank, which is the FSDP, has been a big, big driver towards,
What's the FSDP?
The Financial Services Development Program.
Okay.
So it's the one that basically the governor at SAMA is accountable for to go deliver. And
that's the Monetary Authority, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Sorry, just when we use the acronyms, even though we're familiar with it, listeners around the world may not be. So,
of course, yeah.
My apologies.
So central bank, no problem at all. There's been a lot of impetus around that. I also think that there's been a lot of new talent that's been brought into the kingdom as well, that started to shake things up. From my personal experience of working both in the UAE and within Saudi, and I haven't been in the UAE for a few years, but I actually see Saudi really pushing ahead now, and I think we're quite blessed to have SAMA as a regulator. Very open, taking a driving position in open banking now as we start to to architect and articulate what that actually means. And rather than us going to them saying, can we do this? They would rather us do stuff now and then come and regulate us after the fact. So it's really refreshing to be there. And look, Saudi is different. I went to Saudi thinking, well, it's just going to be like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Fujairah and Sharjah and Qatar. It's nothing like it. It is its own thing. It is definitely different. But it's an exciting place to be, honestly. It's just in the last 24 months, the difference I've seen has been immense.
Yeah.
I wanted to let David jump in, and not before sort of telling a little bit of an anecdote. So, obviously, actually not obviously, but, David is Italian. Unlike, his...
we won't hold that against him, Matteo.
What do you mean, Matteo?
That's okay.
What do you want to say about that?
No. Nobody's perfect. Don't worry. No. But I was actually saying the anecdote that actually David comes from the very same region I was born. And we discovered this sort of online. We've been studying at the same university. We know a lot of the same people, and it was like an absolutely blessing, how the world is small, literally. So, David, you're working for I want to say a mid-size, bank of the region. So my question is, I guess, twofold. One is, how is it to push forward innovation in such a reality? And I know that recently you have been announcing one of the first SME digital financial services platform. It would be great if you could tell us a little bit about it. But also, how do you feel like this pressure for innovation, for the banks in the region, especially now that the world has come to a challenging time?
I think, Matteo, Brad, I'm mentioning what Mike said before around how much is blessed this kind of region because it's pushing so much about innovation. The entire ecosystem is made by having vision and pushing everything, and all the part of the ecosystem is pushing towards innovation, and every single year is accelerating towards the innovation. So it's a good point to be here and try to be part of this kind of race. I would like to say that I give you some data points just to give you the sense of how is this kind of region, that I think that also Mike and Osama will agree on me. But just to say that what is this kind of environment? First of all, in the MENA region, Middle East, we are counting about 405 million, 50 million people, right? And typically in the Gulf region, that is GCC, that is containing the Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, half of them, they are under 25 years old. Just to give you the sense of who are in front of you. People that are very quick and want to have innovation and new product and so forth. Second, the financial inclusion is still a bit a challenge here because the region is becoming increasingly more attractive to fintech. More roughly, two of the three population is unbanked, still unbanked from the data or World Bank. And there is a considerable wealth gap in the country, and the financial institutional quarter in the country have tended to focus on a small portion of earning within the country. Another data point is that, as Osama said, is that the region is leader in payments, especially in the remittances. The remittances is driving force. Some years ago, they made like 44 billion in total remittances in 2017, if I recall it. Towards India, there's the main corridor, India, Pakistan, and Philippines. So I'm not mentioning the mobile device adoptance, the internet connectivity. This is one of the most, the ICT adoption. So the fintech sector here, despite it has just 1% of the total investment of the global, it has really a growth rate that is amazing, 30% year over year. They are growing so much. And then we have an ecosystem in which all the institutions, also the government, have specific program for creating vision and pushing everyone towards the innovation. So it's something that if you compare the situation with Europe is a bit different, but for the rate of the acceleration of the innovation that you can find here, that for some reason, for the structure of the framework regulation, that is a bit more layered in Europe than here, you cannot find here. So that's some data points. You can find from this kind of points a figure that come out that give you the sense of how much is advanced innovation in the region.
Now, just leading off David's introduction there on the remittance side, obviously you run one of the biggest remittance players in the GCC region, but this issue of financial inclusion is very tied up with the remittance business because, of course, if you go back in time before we had the, general purpose reloadable cards, the prepaid platforms, before that, what was it like for foreign workers in the UAE in respect to getting paid and being able to remit funds prior to this financial inclusion push and the digitization effort?
I mean, prior to 2009, before the introduction of the wage protection system, which we call it the WPS as an abbreviation, this became before the mandate by the government and the central bank and the Ministry of the Human Resources. People used to go and queue and get their salaries in cash, and then they come back to these outlets, which is like the exchange houses mainly. Exchange houses in the GCC and particularly in UAE is contributing to more than 80%, 75 to 80% of the total remittances. As just David mentioned, last year it was around $45 billion. The remittances done by the individuals. This is just the individuals, which is one of the largest. UAE comes as a second after the United States in remittance exporting worldwide, as per the World Bank statistics.
That's big.
Yeah.
What sort of numbers are we talking about annually?
So annually around $45 billion.
Wow.
Decline a little bit last year, but this year surprisingly, along with the pandemic, for the first quarter announcement by the Central Bank of UAE, there was a growth of around 5% on remittance.
So it's up in 2020.
It was up which is surprising because, people thought that people will get, they will lose jobs and they will not get. But that system, the wage protection system, really it is a protection system, and it's proven, tested that it can really, ensure that those people are getting, especially the unbanked people. And now this became mandated to be on a stored value, which actually facilitated for us as a company to serve those people within the pandemic. And there was kind of a lot of facilitation by the government entities when they made the lockdown on all other entities. They facilitated us to go open in order to ensure that people getting salaries and they are able to remit funds. Now, we talk about inclusion. I believe it is beyond that one, which is also allowing those people to be included from bank and this one, getting kind of what we call it today, microfinance. I can talk to you later on, if the time allows, about a small, nice experiment we had on that level.
And take into account that the kind of the remittances that we're talking about, mainly nowadays are addressed with money exchange companies, with the mainly and some part of the banks, of course, from the companies that are managing with the business. And you can see how much is the opportunity for the fintechs, because the 80%, roughly 80% of the fintechs now are verticals in payments, transfer, and remittances. So it's really a good opportunity.
Yeah. Now, let's get back to the identity problem here, Osama, because we know Emirates rolled out the national ID card system. They have the fingerprint readers at the airport, so you can expedite your entry. So they're quite advanced on the identity side of things, certainly more so than, say, the US is. But when it came to the fact that you've got and I don't know the figures today, but it used to sort of be about 80% of the population of Dubai at any one time is people that have emigrated to Dubai or are working there. And so, how do you deal with creating robust identities for these workers that come from India and Pakistan, enough to underwrite a bank account, essentially?
I mean, the identity, the UAE identity, what we call it today, the ICA, is a mandatory, compulsory thing for anybody who wants to work or to reside in UAE, and everything else is related to the obtaining such identity. We cannot get into financial transactions without having such IDs. So that became a main tool, which is, I believe, it's became very advanced today, in order to include those people. So we get, for example, we get their salary, we call it the SIF file. We get all those people related to their Emirates ID. So once from the employer, he sent that one, and the funds comes to us, and then we release it to everybody based on that ID. Now this being taken to the second step, which we call it the UAE pass, which is the digital, the same identity, but it's being digital. If you are registered as UAE Pass, you can even open an account remotely, and you can do even a car sale or whatever, anything related to presenting your ID. You can do it through the UAE Pass, which is backed by a blockchain technology.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that insight. Hey, listen, guys, let's just take a quick break. We're getting some good information, but maybe after the break, let's come back and talk about some of the differences between the sort of systemic SME market, the commercial banking market, and the D2C or direct-to-consumer market, and see how those different markets are maturing at different rates. You're listening to Breaking Banks Europe. I'm the co-host with Matteo Rizzi, who's stuck in an airport in Lisbon, and we have Mike, Osama, and Devid joining us from the Gulf region. So we'll be back right after this break.
Do you want to be part of Breaking Banks Europe? Reach out and learn more about the opportunity to be featured in one of our shows. With over 1.6 million listeners and counting, Breaking Banks Europe is bound to become the place to advance critical dialogue in Europe and the UK fintech scene. Reach out on Instagram or Twitter at Breaking Banks EU, or go to www.provoke.fm.
Hey guys, welcome back to episode 43 of Breaking Banks Europe. This is an ecosystem outside in episode. Sorry for the announcement. I'm still at the airport and I hope you can still understand the question. We are here with Mike, Osama, and David, co-hosting with the amazing Brett. Thank you very much for being with us. And I wanted to kick in the second part of this debate with the following question to Mike. Mike, we've been observing in Europe that the fintech innovation has been mainly in the retail space for a little while. And then all of a sudden, the fintechs wake up and understand that maybe it was easier to make money in the B2B space. So all this SME innovation, lending, factoring, treasury businesses, in need to be innovative, just to mention a few. Is that the same pattern that has happened in the region? What's your view, Mike?
Yeah, I think, when I look at Saudi, I think it's been slightly different. Granted, payments has been a big driver to begin with, so we saw a big kind of flurry of in the Saudi sandbox of payment companies, be them with QR codes, whatever it may be. But the second big wave has not actually been towards consumer. It's been more around SME and that kind of SME lending platforms. So probably the three, in my humble opinion, this is the three kind of most successful fintechs that are about to graduate from the sandbox have all been around, filling that gap on the SME side of things. It's been great from a consumer investor perspective. So people have got an alternate place, to put their funds. But it's also been great for the lower end of small business market. Saudi's got lots of government guarantee schemes as well, which I think has helped kind of spur the growth in this area. But, as a bank, today we are also looking at this as a way for us to deploy balance sheet. Gives us a decent return. I don't have any distribution overheads, and I can help do that underbanked, do some good in the underbanked side of SME and deploy some of our balance sheet, via these SME lending platforms as well. So it's been slightly different. I think there's been less kind of the B2C side of things for sure. And partly probably because of licensing restrictions as well, just as much as anything else.
In terms of the sort of makeup and demographic of users, this is the same for UAE and Saudi. But, David, you mentioned earlier, UAE has one of the highest mobile penetrations in the world. Most people have two phones. Internet penetration is catching up rapidly, obviously through the phone, and the bandwidth is improving rapidly, which was an issue a few years ago. Mike, much could be said of the same of Saudi, particularly in terms of the youth and the high digital involvement. So how does that factor in, the fact that sort of the younger population is extremely well mobilized in terms of digital? They have expectations. Where is that pushing the market? Maybe David, do you want to jump in first on that?
Brett, it's quite clear, at least to us, that we are looking at that kind of market in a privileged way because we are one of the best partners for the SME and entrepreneur in the last decades. And the kind of the technology and the way in which has been used for us as SME entrepreneur is pushing very highly the kind of services that they are consuming and the way in which they are interacting with others. Just to give you an example, the way in which we built the platform that we built, we launched a few days ago formally, but we were live for a month. It's a sort of platform, very democratic platform that we built completely with them.
What's that called?
In front of you is called MBF Connect. But as a part of Brett, the point, the concept that they were able to work with us. Actually, we reverse a bit the way in which you build the product, the platform, asking them to build their own platform. And they participated last year at the beginning. We created a community, a very democratic, open community, in which we asked them how would desire to have the best platform for them, for their business, day by day business, by the way, because there are guys that, as you know better than me, they are working many hours in a day, and maybe they have some minutes to dedicate for you for something that could be not related on their business. But they were very engaged from the beginning, and we build up in together this kind of open platform that of course they are managing, and they also not just banking services. At the beginning, we are providing banking services, but also non-bank services. We are partnering with Etisalat, with Visa and others for bringing non-bank services in the platform. And the idea is to let them being connected with the other entrepreneur and SME in the platform through the community, to exchange knowledge base, to exchange services, to become a provider in the community, a sort of marketplace. I'm not saying that we are build something completely new. It's the concept that I personally taken from experiment in Europe with IBA, for example. Matteo will know. With IBA has been built a digital bank, retail bank, completely from scratch, a digital bank through the community. And we did an experiment like that in this region, because we knew that the kind of entrepreneur and SME is specifically, particularly receptive in this kind of thing. And the response is amazing. Now the challenge is how build up more bricks and services to let them to cover the needs that they have in each single stage of their life cycle, because a startup has specific needs. A business as usual stage kind of SME has another needs, and then so forth. So the idea is to use the technology and that kind of open platform to fill the needs that they have.
I guess that's probably, in terms of the UA market, probably what makes it unique is that when you look at lending and credit facilities, you've got such a high percentage of the businesses operating in the UAE are owned and operated in free zones by foreign residents. And so in the US, for example, it's pretty hard to get a loan if you're a foreign business owner coming into the US. But this is a critical market for the UAE, obviously. So how do you do sort of credit scoring? And I know we're going off the tangent a little bit, but this is one different sort of model compared with what you do in, say, the West. You'd assume they've been in the EU, for example, for many years, and they have a long history of financial reporting. But how do you deal with that with foreign-owned or partially foreign-owned entities in the UAE?
Right. First of all, that is a specific kind of thing that we are, thanks to with the digitalization, try to change and transform also, because the kind of response that you need with someone that, especially now, need to have a loan and sustain their business, need to be very quick. And the traditional kind of data points that you can leverage is something that maybe nowadays is still is a bit old and slow. So we are coming up with a different kind of algorithm that pull the data from different, of course, sources, and with some specific algorithm, we'll come up with some risk rate that is pre kind of assessment and post assessment. Is a risk assessment that adjusts, and is a mix of kind of also a loan that we are providing and adjusting the time. Is a sort of dynamic risk rate, but I cannot give you too much, let me say, because we are still building up and is working so far. In the platform will be available that kind of algorithm. Plus, we are opening also to other institutions that can bring more kind of loan and sustain their business.
Great. Hey, so Mike, let me jump in here and ask you, there's different levels of maturity in the market, obviously. A lot of things happening very quickly right now in Saudi. But, compared with the fintech ecosystems and the, what you've seen in the EU and in the US in respect to, obviously huge amounts, hundreds of billions of dollars of investment into this sector, where is there still work to be done? And where do you think that Saudi leads?
Yeah, so look, I think, and maybe this isn't just in Saudi, maybe this is just the world over, but I think there's four things. The first one for me is around culture, and it's culture within the bank in terms of the collaboration that we have, because you either look at fintech as friend or you look at as foe, and when it's foe, you'll basically think you're a turkey voting for Christmas, and that's just nonsense, right? There's so much more we can do, together around that. I think, the second bit is obviously the regulation. The huge kind of role to play to allow fintech to thrive. Let banks partner with or support fintech through things like bank as a service. In our region 3 or 4 years ago, there was no appetite to give me a banking license, a fintech license. There was no appetite for a bank to, kind of rent me a bin or do what the bank code did for Simple and all of that type of stuff. It was just completely closed, right? And, I didn't have the right connections, so I wasn't ever going to, get a seat at the table.
Right.
UK's been different around that. I think regulation has got to kind of accelerate a bit more. On the technology side, right, banks are old, particularly in this region, and with age comes lots of things that, that we've gathered over that kind of lifetime. How many banks can honestly, hand on heart, in this region, put the hand up and say, we are so open, latest architecture, API-based, cloud-native, microserviced up to the hilt. You know what? I can probably count them on this hand, right, who have really got that. And we're doing that at BSF. And I think the final bit is around, how ready are fintechs? Naturally, we all go out and root for the little guy and not the big guy. But let's remember, as the big banks, we're not all bad. It's not always just our fault. As a startup...
Stop making excuses for the big banks, dude.
No, I'm telling you, honestly, as a startup, limited budget, limited runway, have you really got all of your APIs documented in such a way, all of your compliance documentation in the right space? Sometimes not.
Yeah, but look at the UK market, right? In the UK market, the players there, Monzo, Revolut, Starling, they've put considerable pressure on the high street banks.
Yeah.
And sure, but they didn't have that stuff that you're talking about when they started.
Yeah.
So what did they do? They changed customer expectations in terms of the experience largely, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm all for it, right? I'm a corporate misfit. I think when it comes to big banks, I used to fit the mold. I don't anymore, and I desperately want to do things differently. I really do, but unfortunately, and it comes back to that whole thing of culture, we've still got this view that things have to be a certain way, and honestly, until risk becomes systemic, why are we flapping so much about it, right? Let's just experiment a bit. Let's just make things happen. So, for me, they're the four things, but culture is a big thing, big thing for me.
I would just want to say something that might it make me think that when I spent some time in PayPal, 2004, 2007, I saw the same thing that is still happening now, in my view. That was something like that. In PayPal, in 2004, there was already a sort of department that they spent sort of like 88 people that they are spending every single day, every single hour in try to track the position of the mouse of the user in their payment flow in the website, right? So just because they as a PayPal, we know that the payments and the opening account is the main two process that they have that sustain the business, that sustain their lives. And that kind of approach in terms of customer addiction, customer focus, is something that you can have when you really have that kind of feeling that if you don't do it, you don't satisfy the customers at the end, it's something you can go home. You know what I mean? This kind of gesture, you can go home. So is it something that in traditional bank or traditional big corporate that you don't have? And in this way, that kind of startup fintechs that are really focused on the customers and to perfection their business model, it's in a way is fitting very well, complementary with the approach of the big companies. And here, with the thanks to some hubs or Fintech Hive, Galaxy, and whatever, we are bridging the gap, connecting the fintech with the big banks, and it's working very well, to be honest. But I agree completely with Mike that is a culture thing, and also be mechanics or be customer oriented.
Yeah. May I add to what is David saying? I believe this will be a normal evolution, but still we do have kind of challenges. We need to address those challenges. The traditional banks are still in the kind of a certain paradigms when it comes to the new entrants to the market, especially somebody whom they think that it might compete with one of their core activities. This is why also few banks are stepping and developing their own digital bank. We have seen, so they don't want to. Instead of collaborating with a fintech, we know it comes with innovative ideas. It will come, as Brett said, it can respond to certain customers' requirements in a more innovative way. But we've been seeing today banks are stepping into that one by creating their own digital branch because their legacy systems are not able to do that one. This is kind of, I believe,
like Emirates did with Live, right?
Sure, yeah, like Live and like even Rack, we can name a lot of them. I believe, breaking such mentality would be more open. We've been within the what we call the de-risking among. This is a global phenomenon. Not allowing banks, not allowing due to the lot of compliance matters But I believe even that is happening in UK, for example. Finding even if you start and you start up or this one, finding an account with a bank has become a big struggle over there. We need to break that one. This is something which is not there, and this is need lot of dialogue between the different stakeholders within such industry. Because if we want us to really, leverage and grow, we need to facilitate the ecosystem around them to be able to survive. And that is something need to be discussed on a more transparent level, I believe.
Okay, so let me just, we've got, in the few minutes we've got left, I'd like to get into sort of the broader fintech ecosystem. How do you guys feel that's maturing? I know there's, at last count, I think there's about 60 fintechs in UAE. I'm not sure how many in Saudi, but in particular, in terms of sort of the startup ecosystem, the support for startups, they may not be able to, for example, afford to have an expensive operation at the free zone and rent offices and things like that. The investment appetite, obviously, we see the Middle East as sort of capital rich, but how easy is it to access funds for fintechs who want to, experiment in the region? Who'd like to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I'll go first if I may. I think Saudi is a cheap place to set up as a startup. It's awash with capital at the moment. When I talk to all of my VC buddies out there, they're all looking for places to deploy. They want to back homegrown talent as well. They want to showcase the real talent that Saudi has, and with a population of 35 million people, there is plenty of it out there. That said, some of the new kind of, engineering capabilities and some of the, more kind of technical skills are lacking there. And I think that's an issue for Saudi. They're going to have to import, and that's more difficult just because...
Because that means immigration reform, et cetera, right?
It does, absolutely. And I think that's why, the UAE probably has a bit of a jump on them on that. They've built a very attractive kind of expat value proposition. But honestly, for me, Saudi is the market. It's the big one, 35 million people.
Of course you'd say that, dude.
No. Honestly, it's out there for the taking. And you talk to any fintech, right? The UAE is a place that they come to experiment and test it out, but the prize is Saudi.
But everyone, all the markets are making a play for this. Qatar, Bahrain, UAE.
Population, right? There's only one that's got the population. You want to make money, right? Do you want to be one of these fintechs that, you might be worth $1 billion, but you're losing 400 million every year, right? I suppose you don't give a shit. You're going to exit out. But, fundamentals are, still important. That's the way I was with a big population. That's where you're going to make money. And that's why Saudi is such an exciting proposition.
Yeah, but I mean, Mike, what you think is right. There is big population, but the majority in Saudi are Saudis. The difference with UAE is that we have this multicultural and multi-origin, whereas 85% are expats. Well, in Saudi...
And they have expectations that have been transferred from these other markets that they've come from, right?
The adaptation and the adoption, actually, to new offerings from fintech, I believe here is more easier. When it comes people coming from Europe, from and this millennials people coming even from Southeast Asia or other places, or they are more easy to engage with you when you come with certain products. While in Saudi, because it's a huge country and it's scattered, and in some rural areas you find only Saudis over there. So that might happen, yes, in the major cities, but when it comes on country level, still you have, I believe, good opportunity to test at least your product down here.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. Like I say, I think the UAE is a great place to go out and test, because you have to satisfy so many different demands. But you want to scale, you go to Saudi to scale. The problem you then have is if you think that you can lift and drop a value proposition that worked in Dubai into Saudi, it ain't going to work. All the primary research that we've done, and we spent a lot of time, effort and money doing primary research around this, it does show that Saudis are different, but they are as hungry and as open. Honestly, I'm convinced it's the most misunderstood country on the planet.
It certainly has made incredible progress the last few years, just from my visits there, in terms of what it was like 10 years ago.
Yeah. Even 5 years ago, man.
Oh, you're right. So, David, let me give you the last word on this one.
Yeah, just I agree with Osama and Mike. And I personally, what I saw so far in terms of business plan for many fintechs, and actually, when it was my fintech business plan in payments, in the platform payments that I launched 5 years ago, the sequential was starting up the platform in UAE to test and grab the first phase of the phase stage of the business plan, plus scaling in the most close region, the country that is Saudi. Saudis give you, as Mike said, give you a really big bulk of people that are hungry to digitalization and to test new thing. But consider that the entire region here is acting as a gateway towards the other region that is the more east, the Africa, South Asia. So you have 8 trillion market composing 3 billion people that you can reach very easily. So you can also, the institution, the government is something that the messages can hear. Try to starting up your business model, scale, and then jump.
And technically,
that is something that you can do.
And you've got stronger technical competency in the UAE because of that rich, the imported talent from India and so forth, right? Would you argue that, or?
To be honest, yeah, you can. First of all, it's a challenge. The talent, the skill set,
it's still a challenge.
I don't know if Osama and Mike is agree with me. There's still a challenge. We are
all of the
importing
engineering that we do out of London at the moment, right?
Right.
It's still a challenge. To attract talent in the region and stimulate their own talent pool is both Bahrain and UAE. They've initiated a lot of initiatives in downgrade the kind of the cost of living and so forth to create a lot of initiative to import a lot of talent and skill set. I would not say talent, but skill set,
including the residency. Now, if you are an entrepreneur, you can have long residency in UAE. If you are coming with your own idea or theme as an entrepreneur, they grant you also like 10 years residency to stay. So you think about the other regulatory things about your staying down here. So there's a lot of incentives for creating the landscape for entrepreneurs, innovators to come down here and start their own ideas down here.
With this great message, guys, is about time to wrap up. I've been on purpose silent, one, because Brett is an amazing moderator and kind of you didn't need it much. But and thank
I've done
you
it a
very
few
much.
times.
And thank you, Brett, for taking the lead here because I prefer not to invade you with most of the usual airport sounds. But at the same time, I enjoyed a lot being like half moderator, half spectator live of this show. Thank you so much for being with us, Mike, Osama, and David.
Thanks for having us.
Exactly. And Brad, we should do more of this crossover moderation. Yeah. Absolutely. Guys, stay with us. That's Breaking Banks Europe, and it's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with Fintech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.